Hello, brothers, and welcome to Heroic Stories. It's a series to strengthen Catholic men with real stories of heroic grit and faith, and it's brought to you from heroicmen.org. I'm your host, Dominic from Heroic Men. Each week, I sit down with a guest to ask them how they made it through their darkest moments, who their heroes were, and who they want to be a hero for. These are real men who've battled doubt, they've sought purpose, and they've changed their lives in ways that can inspire you and me to do the same. These are the stories that remind us that heroism isn't born, it's made. About this line that we use with heroic men, which is, heroes aren't born, they're made. And invariably, when you start talking about that, people go, well, look, I'm not a hero. Father Ricardo, episode 1, said that pretty emphatically. I'm not a hero. It's like, okay, all right, fine. Maybe we might want to call you that, or we might, call that to other people. But if a hero isn't born, a hero is made. There's usually a moment of darkness that challenged somebody. So if I were to ask you, Dean, what was a dark moment in your life? What were you going through at that time?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for asking me to join in this at all. And as you said, yeah, do I think myself as a hero? Not even close. I feel like I'm still a work in progress. If a hero's made, I pray I'm on that journey. And yeah, there's been some ups and downs in my life, and I could tell you more about my story or God's presence in it, which is an amazing thing. But yeah, it's not always one that goes well. And I think when, as you and I are friends, we know, and I learned at middle age that I'd be losing my eyesight, mid-career, midlife, have 3 kids. Losing my eyesight to a very rare medical condition that not much is still known about. We do know the
Really?
gene, we don't
Wow.
know the therapies. And now I'm 63, and I've been living as basically a sight-impaired person for about 18 years. Since I left the workforce and all that. I think that moment where and some 10 years earlier I was involved in a really deep reversion, which is the powerful place where God showed up when I was diagnosed. But a lot of this didn't show up. The symptoms of eyesight and such didn't show up until I was 40. And then between 40 and 44, all my functional eyesight went. There goes the career. I had a master's degree. I had invested heavily in my career. Let's put it that way. It was all about me. And then when it's all about you and it gets taken away, it feels like it's all about you and you feel like a victim. And I think there were times where I felt like, wow, Lord, what I think I've overcome, and I think I've tried to follow and I've tried to grow in my faith, and yet here we are. What are we doing here? And I think I was then engaging in some self-destructive habits. I wasn't sleeping easily. I was, curling up in my little chair and entertaining myself, trying to just, get away from my life rather than embrace it. And God has been incredible in being patient with me. And I think, but that, where you have 3 kids that are looking at you, wondering how you're going to handle this challenge. We'd made a commitment that I would not be a victim. My wife and I were really, she's been amazing through the whole thing. And I took strength from our marriage, certainly, to try to overcome this and say, what, I've got to find some role models who are visually impaired. I've got to find, some other heroes in my life to help me lead me through this, because I'm just not smart enough on my own to do it. But, and have I done it? I don't know if I've done it well or not, but here I am, and I'm just trying to serve God. I'm okay being decreased so that He can increase, and I try to do that every day.
Amazing. Oh, wow. Well, look, I want to come back and ask you about a bit more of your actual story, the masters that you were going through, and maybe a little more of what it is that you're up to today. But you said something interesting there. You said your new role models, and I'm curious, how did you get through this? Like you said, it's so easy to want to curl away or pull away from a cross like this. I imagine it felt pretty brutal coming out of that doctor's appointment and getting a diagnosis, or what is it called? Prognosis? Like that, and not feeling like a death sentence, but I imagine for what you were trying to put together with your life, it probably felt like that. How did
Yeah.
you get through that?
So diagnosis came at a very interesting time. You talk about God incidences. I was changing jobs from a corporate kind of HR leadership training job, and I'd been there for about 6, 7 years. But I took a job on the outside, being a consulting account manager, to work for a company that I had been certified to lead their training programs, things like that. And it's in that 2 weeks between the old job and the new that I set up doctor's appointments because I knew I'd have to change healthcare. I'm going to get a new prescription for my glasses. I'm going to go to the dentist. I'm going to do all that so I don't, so I can hit the ground running without any worries. I'll figure out my healthcare later. But we also had a week's vacation at again, another God incident at a Christian family camp that had a 2-year waiting list. We got in about 3 weeks, with about 3 weeks notice. And it was a Protestant camp, and it really was transformative and helped shape and create a new faith in me. So I go to the doctor. My ophthalmologist was not there. Sitting in for him was the chairman of the University of Minnesota Department of Ophthalmology. And I have my 5-year-old daughter. I got a book with her, and I had her that day. We were down at the clinic, and she's on my knee, and this guy's trying to do the exam, and he pauses and pauses. And then he goes around the back of me and pulls my shirt back. It's like, that's not an eye exam I've ever had before. And as it turns out, he said, I need about 10 minutes to go consult a medical journal. I think you've got something. I'm concerned for you. Let me just give me the. And he comes back and says, you know what? I'm pretty firm that you have this thing. It's a recessive genetic disorder, and it's going to cost you your eyesight. And it's also going to cause some other issues. When I pulled your shirt back, it's because it's a connective tissue disorder. Connective tissue is all we're made of. It's going to affect you. I'm like, wow. And at that moment, Dominic, I didn't feel a thing. I didn't feel worry. I felt a ton of peace. We were coming out of this family camp where God is there and very present to me. And it just floated me along for maybe it's denial, which I'm completely capable of. And yet, it was there. And there was evidence of it already forming up, but it was there. And so for the next 7-8 years, I functioned I knew this was happening. There was nothing I could do to control that. I went about work every day. Therese was very well of it, my wife. We made I had to go find doctors and all that stuff, that you do. But not until later. And so I really actually it wasn't a dark time when I got diagnosed. Oddly
Okay.
peaceful,
Okay.
oddly peaceful. And I give that to God at the moment because clearly that week before was laid out well in advance of my knowing. And I give those ministers who are giving their lives to the Lord in that little family camp in Medford, Wisconsin, all the credit. They were just wonderful brothers and sisters to us. We were Catholic, so we got knocked around a little bit, challenged, and we couldn't defend ourselves, which led us
Sure.
in our Catholic faith. But that's another story.
I'm curious to understand. So you said you had to find some new heroes, maybe some visually impaired heroes.
Yeah,
Who did you end up finding? Who inspired you?
that's interesting. Yeah, so the internet was fairly new then. We're talking 2000, 2, 3, 4. And there wasn't much, but in the normal course of preparing for eyesight loss, I connected with the State Services for the Blind here in Minnesota, and they send out a trainer to help me learn how to keyboard and do some things. You get the white cane training, you get, all that stuff, all services that are provided. And they don't send out people with perfect vision to do that. You find people who are sight impaired. And one guy's name was Tom Lieski. I'll never forget him. He started his own cab company when he was ticked off that he couldn't get a cab to come pick him up at the right time. Sight impaired, he needed cabs at the time. He was doing radio work. He was doing all kinds of little entrepreneurial things, and he had less eyesight than I may ever have. He was incredible, and I took him not only as a friend but just a great role model for me. The other people were mostly sight impaired, but our pastor, we changed churches as a result of that experience that we had in the family camp. We knew we were looking for more than our current pariship was providing, and maybe our whole history of upbringing. Not to slam any parishes, they're all good, but we needed something more, and we found one. Remarkably very close to us. We never knew about it, and it's where we are still today, almost 30 years later. And that pastor was instrumental in advising and accepting and loving and encouraging and all those kinds of things. So I've been amazed all along, Dominic, at the people that have shown me great kindness and have been. Um, and I think what I've realized too is that over time, I'm not perfect, and nobody else is either. Newsflash. And so it's been humbling, and yet God has shown me that that He loves me and He's got a plan. And I have free will certainly, but when I choose for Him, generally things go better.
I'm curious to keep pulling on that because who were some of the heroes then growing up? As as men, I think we look to specific examples to model and emulate. I'm curious who were your North Stars maybe growing up, and maybe how did that change? And I know it's easy to go, especially as we get older. Well, I'm trying to model myself after Christ. It's like, okay, that's the easy answer. Let's be a little more specific. Is there? It could be an actual person figure, a family figure, a story, or something. Who are those kinds of heroes for you?
You're really tapping into that's an excellent question. And I think for all of us men, we need to answer that. Look across, our lifespan and see who influenced us more. If I'm in a prison ministry here, and I'm very fond of saying, look, we're all the average of our five best friends or the people we hang with closest. Who's influencing you? Are they averaging you up or down? What are you doing? When I was younger, it was all about kind of status comparison. Grew up in a suburb of Milwaukee that was not, I mean, part of it was affluent, part of it we were more of a working class side of town kind of thing. We, loved the Packers, got to watch, Super Bowl champion. Everything's about winning. And I think I grew up in a house that really had parents that worked their tails off, came out of very meager upbringing. And at the time, they maybe weren't my heroes, Dominic, to be really honest, because I felt like other families seemed to go to Florida on vacation every year and go to, these far-flung places or have bigger home. And to a kid growing up there, I compared. And as I got older, I really, really have begun to cherish the example my father laid down as a man who was sacrificial in his fatherhood, worked his tail off, became something coming out of a home where they had hardly enough food to eat. And my mom in the same way, and she's still living. She's in her 90s. Work, work, work. She loves to use her gifts for work. And I probably emulated, as I was younger, people that were achieving on the football field and track, and performing arts and things like that, because they were getting recognized and they had all that external validation. And my relationship with God wasn't. It was more, hey, we're going to church every Sunday. We're cradle Catholic. We do the minimum, but you better go to mass. If you don't go to mass, you're going to pay. And so it was kind of that mentality at the time. And I don't know if that it would. I hope that doesn't exist anymore, but I'm sure it does in many families. And I was that way. And in college, it was all about pursuing my own. Um, in many ways, not a very focused college experience. Did meet my wife at the University of Wisconsin, and praise God for that. almost 39 years later. So and then it changed. You bet it changed. I mean, eventually, you're not getting the applause on the stage. You're not getting the affirmation. You're not getting the daily, being told what to do by your parents. You're on your own. And now it's on me to be an adult for a change. And that transition, was hard. And then you end up, eventually, God willing, you pull yourself through and you get a job and you actually, start to make a plan for your life. But really, it's God in the background the whole time. And
Hmm.
I think the people that changed were the managers that were compassionate, the ones who were willing to take the time, uh, people that showed some of the virtues that Jesus shows that, you begin to appreciate and realize these people are really important in my journey. And now you start to say, how can I serve? Hopefully you make that transition to, okay, if I've had these blessings, how can I do that for others? But managers at work, I was careful about who by the way, I got fired a couple times right out of college. I'd never been told no.
Really?
I mean, I'd never lost a job in my life. I always overachieved. I had, that. whole kind of in my mind anyway, that idea that I'm smarter than the average bear. And
How did you handle that? The experience of being fired.
yeah,
How did you take that?
oh my gosh. Well, it's a great question. I don't know that I can really, at the time I thought, what is going on here? You know, first of all, what's wrong with them? But then eventually it became, no, what am I not doing or what am I doing? Where am I missing here? Somehow that process went on, for a couple of years where I got myself situated, got into grad school, focused on what can I contribute, what's the need out there that I can fill. And this was in a job kind of sense, it wasn't in a spiritual way. And I'm fond of telling people in my early journey, Dominic, that if the number one command is, we're made for relationship with God the Father first and then with others. Love the Lord your God with all your mind, heart, soul, and strength. Yeah, no. For me, it was, hey, love Dean with all your mind, heart, soul, and strength. God bless my efforts. And for a while he puts up with that. I think God does, but there's more that he wants to show us. And so yeah, there was some kind of, I don't want to call it clinical depression, but there was some real wondering and about what is going on here, on what's my place going to be. And again, that spirit of comparison that I grew up with, and kind of performance mentality that you have to do to be loved, really started to work on me and made me just dig down even harder and get through grad school in a year and a half and get moving, find ways to get a house and now we get our kids going. And, it was all the markers of what I thought success looked like.
Yeah, yeah. That's a pretty brutal time of, I mean, it's a pretty brutal experience. And then to be going through that must have been pretty crushing. How, let's not be idealistic and stuff. Just reflecting back on that time, how did you get through that time? And maybe it was just burning out and it was not relying on God and stuff. How did you pull through? Because I want to ask you, in a minute about how God became very real to you, but how did you manage to survive that time? It sounds like it was very intense.
Was. I mean, if we, again, at that point I was married, and I think that caused me to have to think through this isn't just my life I'm taking here. Time to work on. I've got to consider her and our life together and what we've committed to. Um, that helped pull me out of my, maybe a kind of a selfish spin or spiral. And I would say maybe that's how I think I got through it by doing and trying to achieve in places where I was raised to say education matters. You get yourself educated or you're going nowhere. Well, I guess I leaned into that, and it was a launching pad to a degree. I'd given some thought for the first time about who am I, what are my gifts, and what can I possibly do to contribute? Who's going to pay me for that? And and so I did a whole bunch of, there was a book called What Color's Your Parachute? I remember reading it. And I had a little background in sales already, so I was an extrovert and I was comfortable meeting people. But they have a really strong strategy around informational interviewing. Go talk to people doing what you think you want to do, just like you try on a shirt at, the store or something. You can put it back, but go ahead, try to see what it feels like. And I did that. I took probably 200 of these things, Dominic. I mean, I drove everywhere. I had, people that would be willing to meet me. And little did I know I was building up a network at the time and learning a ton. Um, I was searching. A lot of it wasn't at this point a spiritual search. It was figure out my place in this world and go, try to make my pile of money and go do, achieve the life goals I want.
Really, yeah. I really have a sense a lot of these kinds of specific experiences is it's like the visual of a dandelion growing through a crack in the sidewalk, or perhaps some roots pushing up under a concrete pad, making a crack and pushing through, and that's how grace works on us. And so we spend a lot of our younger years, I think, trying to learn lessons and figure out stuff, and then very slowly God is working on us from the inside out. If you were to identify, especially for the young men watching this, a little more like myself, one wrong lesson that you learned and overcame, and maybe one good lesson from that specific time period of your life.
I think
Hot seat here. I didn't prep you for that one.
yeah, you ask me tomorrow, I might answer it differently. But what I would say is, what's really wrong is that, in John 15, Jesus says, I'm the vine, you're the branches. He says very specifically, you can do nothing without me. And when I look back, it's like, you got me.
Yeah.
Now I
Yeah.
see. I think looking back, I could see where God was in my life. At the time, I wasn't spending the time to honor God the way He should have been honored, and see His role in my life. Think that it's all about me and up to me. And when it's all up to you, you take a lot on your shoulders, wrongly, and a lot of pressure. And I used to, my wife and I had a lot of discussions, and she said, and I was of the mind, look, a heroic man, a father, provides for his family, disciplines his kids, they get good grades. It's all this stuff that I knew. And it's all up to me. Now that I'm more disabled and the kids are embarrassed about me at school or people are noticing and you lose certain friends, it's all that goes with this change. I thought it was all up to me. Wrong. I am so much more. And by the way, affluence and all the things we were pursuing, you know, I would just say what I have learned is that when you give it over, and we've simplified our life greatly, because I don't drive, and I was tired of her having to drive me to get a haircut, drive me to the bank, do whatever. And if I can walk to some places, let's move a place where I can go be more mobile, and that all happened. God's timing was amazing. Anyway, another story for another day. But the lesson learned is that God is in every moment of every day, and it's really helpful to be aware of that. It's also, I do this much, I give him my 5 loaves and 2 fish, and somehow he makes dinner out of it and adds dessert. So those would be the lessons, not probably real original here, but for me they were, you know.
Oh, that is true. So you now work in prison ministry, and then you're also involved with Heroic Men. So I'm curious to ask a little bit about both of those. We work together at Heroic Men. For those who don't know, we're both part of the team. But I'd love to understand more about your work with prison ministry. How did you get into that, or what inspired you to start that? Yeah, where did that come from for your life?
Yeah, so it's volunteering, I'll be there tonight actually in Stillwater, Minnesota. I'm a very tiny part of this, by the way, but the prison ministries existed. It's called Residents Encountering Christ, all about putting on retreats and encounters with Christ inside the walls. And these are guys, and these are maximum security prisons generally that I go to, and these are guys that maybe get out at some point. Most of them not for a really long time, um, and and uh, and I resisted that. So somebody within our church runs it, has for many years led it. There's several people in our church that are part of it, and I knew about it. There's no way I was going in there. And whether it was me judging them, you deserve to be there. What I think the bigger issue when I finally did say yes, and the biggest anxiety I had, Dominic, was I was asked because they needed people. They need people to go in there and put on the retreats. They need people to have a certain disposition to do that. They need people that can get through the background check and all that, which isn't really a huge issue. But the bigger issue was the ministry needs to go on, and so God's looking for good candidates for that. And she spotted me out, and for 2 years, um, I jokingly say, yeah, she gnawed on my leg for two. Every time I saw her, it was, have you thought about Rick? Have you prayed about it? And I used to see her or know she's there or hear her voice and go get a cup of coffee in the family activity center just to because I knew the question was coming. And
Why were you resisting it at the time? You just had a different plan for your life. It just didn't interest you.
yeah,
Why were you resisting that?
I think because I thought, what's a little suburban guy from Milwaukee going to have in common? There was a fear element to it. There was a fear of what would I be getting myself? What can I possibly offer? It was all about me, in that answer. And I think eventually said yes to it, and it was profound. The first retreat, I was just a mess, watching the Holy Spirit work in there. And what I realized right away, each of us have a table, and I was a table resource, if you will. So you have groups of tables. We create an identity for ourselves. We hear talks all day, go up to the front, present as a group our responses. It's about building brotherhood in that 2.5 days, really. And it starts long before that, and it continues after. But the idea was we want these guys to know who Jesus Christ is. So our job is just to be there, be Jesus Christ, be unjudgmental, be there. And I was terrified to go in the first day. And so within 20 minutes of the first morning, at my table, I got 6 guys. One doesn't speak English. uh, these other couple, one guy's going to get out in a couple, he's a parole violator. The other guys are lifers. I'm thinking, what am I doing here? And within 15 minutes, one of the guys I still know today, unfortunately, he's still there and will be. Hey, Dino, can I get you a cup of coffee? I know I know you can't. The water's right over there. Let me go get you. And I thought, I got more in common with these guys, and that has just been proven out over the years. And now you can't keep me away. So we have had
Wow.
just a really profound. It's changed me to love my brothers in there and to try my best to serve them. A
Amazing.
lot of them they have no idea what they've done for me, in terms of just honoring. I know what people are probably listening to this say. Yeah, double murder. You earned your way in there. Yeah, they have. And a lot of these guys just want to do their time. They regret it. A lot of times it was just a snap decision. They goofed, and now they're there. Or in many cases you have the gang thread in there, the fatherless homes or the motherless homes. Just you have a lot of commonalities, but in general the guys are in there and they just want to do their time. I'm not saying it isn't a dark place, and we're seeing the Christian guys coming. We're trying to help them build community in there, but they're souls that God loves too, and I've come to learn that, and it's just been an incredible journey for me to and see how some of them have changed internally too by the power of the Holy Spirit. To just be gripped by it and to build brotherhood in there is cool.
Lost you just for a second. Maybe the recording kept it, but I just missed a little bit. But I want to go back and ask you, or just keep pulling on that thread. You said something I'd like to understand a bit more. You said that they have no idea how much that they have done for you. Um, what is that? What are some of the lessons that you have taken away? How have you been changed from this ministry?
I think about my past, Dominic, and I think about choices that I made or could have made or how things could have ended up, and I could just as easily be in there. You know, things, circumstances, the way some of these guys land in there, you just can't make it up. And I think they're challenges that we all face growing up, trying to be part of something. I was never in a gang, but I mean, just choices we made growing up. Driving with one eye open when I was younger and doing just stupid things. My life could have been so different. And so I do have a tremendous amount of compassion for these guys because it could just as easily be me. And I think we could probably all say that we're really honest about it. And once they're in there, they're struggling with the same questions we are. They want to plan and have a future. They're searching for God in their life, just like we are, in a lot of ways. And they've got challenges and obstacles that I'll never have, and I can really appreciate that now. Having been through a few. So I think that's what's brought. I think that's why this has been a good fit for the time being. And by the way, the ministry. There's a guy that's going to drive a half hour my way to come and pick me up tonight so that I can teach and go and with him and join two other volunteers as we go in there tonight. Uh, I've just been amazed by the friendship that I've received within the ministry as well. The others who are in it.
Amazing, amazing. So small detour, but I want to come back to what the lessons you're taking away from prison ministry and dealing with and just dealing with men. So how did you how did you hear or learn about heroic men? And what inspired you to join the team, or what's that part of the story?
Yeah, that's a very interesting part. So, ministry to men is happening in the prisons. I don't go into women's prisons, but didn't really realize that was going to be a theme until about 4 years ago. So a part of I think some of the heroes I leaned into, by the way, were when we joined this new church, and I knew, didn't tell a soul besides my wife, that I had this diagnosis, didn't know where that would land, was going to trust God with it. We joined this new church, and it's a thriving church. It's a charismatic Catholic church, even today. You go in that place, and you could feel at the time, feel that. I've talked about that pastor, founding pastor, feel that Holy Spirit. You walk in the door, and it's like, and there was something there, and yet we felt completely alone. Everybody knows each other, and you're there. And you go into the little activity center afterwards. The kids want to have a cookie or whatever, and we're sitting by ourselves. And occasionally somebody come up to you, and eventually we start joining ministries and various things so we can get to know people, but also just get involved. And you meet some people. There was a guy we met early on who my wife is from a northern suburb of Milwaukee. I met her in college. And somebody said, "Oh, Mark is from that same community." I go, "Mark, who's Mark?" He goes, "That's that guy over there." I'm like, "Far out, another Packer fan. I'm going to go find him." So I went over and introduced myself to him, and we became friends. Within a couple, and I had been praying for Catholic Christian friends. It's a prayer I had at the time, and for our family too, to get to know and to get to know our place in that parish and be able to be not only growing in our faith but in the community. Remember, we're in a new state. We moved to Minnesota for grad school and all. We're in a new state. We're in a new community. We just got a house. And we're new to everything, and we don't know how long we'll stay in this place, but we're going to be here, and this is our new church. Within 4 months, I became part of a men's group, a weekly men's group that decided to form up out of the ashes. Just, I think a couple of the wives of the men said, "You guys have to start a group." And somehow they
That's
invited me
great.
along. It's always the women. So, so I became part of this men's group, which 28 years later, we're just finishing up 33 days of morning glory tomorrow morning. Uh, meet every Friday morning. And some of these guys were a little more advanced in their faith, some were not. I would call myself one who was not. Kind of pulled me through. We grew in our faith together. We became not only close friends in Christ, but friends socially as well. And now we've been to every wedding, every baptism. Grandkids are coming. We've just been blessed. But that experience in men's ministry, I shouldn't say that. I should say in men's groups, and I've seen what that's done for my faith life, for the quality of my life. And these are the guys that when I did eventually have to tell them about, probably 2 or 3 years in, "Guys, I'm going to tell you something. I'm about to lose my eyesight to this medical thing. Just want you to know, pray for me and my wife, but this is going to happen apparently." And how kind they've been to me. It's been amazing. And fast forward now, 20 some years, our CEO, Dan Donaldson, lives in Denver. One of the men in my men's group, Mark, the guy that I mentioned to you, moved to Denver, and they both worked at Augustine Institute together. Eventually, both of them left, and they're in their own lanes now doing different things. Dan with us, and Dan was looking for somebody in Minnesota, and Mark said, "I know a guy." And so I volunteered with Heroic Men about 4 years ago for about 2 years. 3 years, well, 2 years. It's been 3 years now. 2 years, and then they called that role a regional leader. And then when Dan needed somebody in this role, I discerned that, yeah, I'll do this. So
So, what's the overlap between your work in prison ministry and then the ministry that you and the group of guys that your parish are into? What's the overlap between the two? Did you get into prison ministry because you started that group at the parish and began to realize maybe there's a need to bring that to the prisons?
Oh, the connection, Rob. I wish the connection were stronger than that. I've been in this men's group for 28 years, been really blessed by it. Maybe somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought I should give that away somehow. I had no idea what I was really in for with the prison ministry, to be really honest about it. But it's evolved that way to where I realized, what, men need brotherhood. And it's become very clear to me that that's what God's calling me to now in this season of my life. And to again, it isn't about me. It's about showing up. And if I can show up, stuff happens, and it's not mine. It's the Holy Spirit. The connection, I can always, and I do have many testimonies around just the experience and the blessings of being in a men's group. Weekly over the last 28 years, we take off around the holidays a little bit. And maybe in the summer months, guys are on vacation. But otherwise, we've been really faithful to it and traveled together. We've served. We went to for a while you need at places gotta serve. We went to a nursing home and played bingo with the residents for about 8 years, about once a month. But for 8 years, brought our kids into it. Felt like that was a good thing to do as fathers. So I mean that thing's taken on various life forms, but it's a constant. The prison ministry ultimately, right now where I'm at, Dominic, especially with Heroic Men, is we need always to have brotherhood. We need to have friends we can lean into. Even if we're married and have a big family around us, we can feel completely alone. I've experienced that too. And I think for us to be fully, you know, alive in Christ, we're not made to do this alone. Jesus had 12 apostles. He sent them out two by two. When two or three are gathered, all the things. And I think as a group now, we're starting to see a society that has a loneliness crisis that we may never solve it all, but we want to give options to men, call it out, and say, look, when you have too much space in your life, if you work from home and you're on the computer all the time, if you're, you can gamble on the computer, for goodness sake. You can, of course, sin with porn. You can do, guys that live, just the places, the things that can take us down. We have an enemy. I mean, God prepares a banquet in the sight of our enemy. He doesn't make the enemy go away. The enemy's there every day. And so, the degree to which I can lean into brothers has been a difference maker for me, for sure.
Amazing, amazing. Well, last question then, as we wrap out. I'm the whole focus of what we're trying to figure out as fast as possible is how do we understand the systems of how to help more men be able to reach out to other men in the spirit of brotherhood. Figure out this whole 2 by 2 thing. Figure out how to disciple Christ, how to model him, to be able to reach out to other men. So we're trying to figure out, what are the words that we say? What are the scripts that we use? How do we make it easy for other men to go, oh, I can see why this needs to happen. I've got the resources and the training so that I can step up and start doing this in my parish area and so on. But I'm so interested in these specific, the experiences that you are having with prison ministry, what you're learning from that, and then maybe bringing from a space like that out into parishes, or reading from that out into how men network with other men. I think one of the stats that we like to quote is like 30% of, I think it's 30% of men, maybe in the Catholic parishes, and it's probably in the culture at large, live in a state of isolation that is almost as bad, if not the same, as living in what is it called, an isolation chamber, right, where you have nobody to talk to, nobody who knows you, nobody who cares if you go away. It's brutal for the human soul, the human psyche. So that you may not be in the four walls of a prison, but you can feel like you're constrained or you're imprisoned within your own life. And this is why Heroic Men's here. We've got to do something to turn this around, change this. I hear a lot of overlap with what you're up to with this ministry. So here's my question. One, maybe what's the craziest story you've heard sitting at that table with those guys? What's been the craziest story that you've heard? And then what are your recommendations to men about being able to walk across the aisle just at a parish to say hi to other men? But first, what might be that story?
So crazy story. Let me clarify a little bit. Just what brought men to the room?
Just somebody's story, maybe after interacting with you and your ministry for a while, and they're still in prison, but perhaps their life has started to change purely from engaging in this experience of brotherhood, or just talking with you all. And crazy in air quotes. Maybe it's intriguing or interesting or really,
So, you love a good story, right? The reclamation projects. And there's one guy he comes to mind right away. He didn't start with us. His story started after he had committed double murder in northern Minnesota. He had gone off his meds. He had a wife and family, job. He had gone off his meds. He decided somehow that he was going to take the life of a widow that he knew was living kind of in an isolated home, and he did that on a Friday night. And I want to say on a Sunday, he knew of another widow, and he did that. He went and took her life and robbed her. And then he felt so much remorse that he went back to the first place. The corpse was still there. He decided that he was going to set the house on fire, and that's where he was going to go to. He was going to stay in there. His own testimony, and at this point he had no relationship with Christ. This is about 30 years ago. And he did. He stayed in there. He's getting burned. He's dying. And there's an explosion that literally blows his body through a window and outside. He lives. He's burned. He's got nubby fingers. He's got scarring. And he goes to jail, and one of the jailers repeatedly said to him while he's in county jail waiting his trial, Bible study Tuesday night, Deacon Bob's over there if you want to go. Leave me alone. That kind of response for a long time. Finally he goes, if you'll never bring it up again, I will go. Guy goes, fair enough. You want to go? We'll tell Bob you're coming, And he does, and his life has changed. So now, of course, double murder. He admits to everything, by the way. That's the way he treated his, a lot of times in court, you're optimizing your options, trying to minimize your sentence, and that's a normal way to go. Lawyers that's what they're paid to do, apparently. But he ends up jailed. And while in jail, He gets several college degrees, including a master's in theology, all of this online, you know. He becomes an internal resource. He becomes one of our kind of favorite guys because he's a coach and a mentor inside. Not a big guy, and he's got all these abilities despite his physical disfigurement. He has a lot of discomfort with that, which he accepts completely. And after 25 years or so in being Stillwater prison, where I'll be tonight, but he ends up finding out that he's going to step down. The judge that, meaning that he's going to ultimately work on being released. Uh,
Okay.
and the reason is because the judge that sentenced him followed him and found out about all these people in his life that want to hire him if he ever gets out, that want to, use his story and his skills to reach other men. And the judge actually flew back from Utah, where he's retired, and helped now with this process of release eventually. Crazy.
That's amazing.
We miss him at Stillwater. They said, you know what, I don't want to keep you here. You go and do what God calls you to do. Anyway, is that crazy? I don't know if that's the kind of story.
That's incredible. That is incredible. Being able to turn it around like that is gosh, it's amazing. And people looking out for each other. Like you said, that simple little thing seems like that little spur, that little thorn in his side was that, go to the Bible study, just check it out. So if you were to leave our listeners with a word of advice or a recommendation that's just straight out of your own experience about walk across the aisle at the parish, see that empty seat or see that person doesn't know anybody or something to connect with another man, what have you found to be the easiest way to make that happen? Now, I know you said you're an extrovert. A little easier for you than maybe other men who are more introverted or something, but what advice would you like to leave with people?
Yeah, okay. What I think is that the seeds of discouragement are sown. We personal invitations men respond to. Well, first of all, men don't respond. You're gonna have to ask them 6 times. No, I'm good, dude. Okay, thanks. But I think we all know they need more, and God has a bigger plan than what we see in the pews. It's the guys that aren't coming to church that I'm more concerned about. But how do you reach them? And you. And that's another story for another day. But I think the piece is that for men that take this on, they feel the call to reach out in brotherhood. Is continue to grow in Christ on your own. Continue that, yes, but then you got to give it away at some point. And when I think about it, and the guys that we're working with now, we're in the middle of leadership training and doing some of these things. Is that I've asked the guy 4 times, and say, yeah, you're going to have to. It may take 10 years. God has time, and he's going to continue to work on that guy's heart. Maybe what you did is just like that jailer. He's asking every prisoner, Bible study tonight, you want to go? And that little tiny moment may lead to something. And so don't be discouraged and don't take your eyes off Christ in this, because it's really, that's our 5 loaves and 2 fish. Just do what we're called to do, as simple and maybe just be faithful to it. And I'm still learning that every day. I pray that I do it better and more tomorrow and the next day and the next day. But that would be it. It's just to be persistent and remembering, if you're feeling called to this, there is a huge need out there. Huge. You had mentioned last week that every 13 minutes we lose a man to suicide. We're not a suicide prevention program, but we are a brotherhood. And we can, as who knows, would Mike, in the jail cell have thought about taking his life again? Probably. And this jailer had the thought to say, there's an option here, you want to go? And that may save other men too, so that they can be the men we're all called to be. And that may be heroic, it may be very simple and small, which is where I kind of put myself. And you get all kinds, but you just never know until you do what we're called to do. And the discouragement piece can be really easy. I'm hearing it a lot. It's like, I'm trying, but the ministry isn't growing. Nobody's signing up. Our pastor isn't supportive. Whatever the reasons are, we need to persist in that. If we truly believe in it, God will make a way. And that would be my last thought for that.
Thanks for joining us on Heroic Stories. If this story connected with you, send it to someone. And if you want to chat with us about anything that we've said, head on over to our community at heroicmen.org. We're here for every man out there who feels they're made for more, has the faith to step up, and doesn't know what to do. Come and share your journey with us. Can I share something about a group of men like you? The Heroic Men app is powered by an alliance of supporters. They step up so that others can access life-changing content and community at no cost. Right now, there's another man out there who needs stories and content like this. Maybe he can't even afford a bus fare to Mass. Maybe it's a teen questioning if he matters at all. And maybe it's a father searching for real brotherhood. Your $5 a month covers his ability to access this content. One more soul reached, one more life changed. $5 a month, that's it. If you can, consider paying it forward today. And if you can't, share Heroic Men with another man. That alone could bring another man back to faith in Jesus Christ. And here's how we give even more back to you. Every donor is welcome to join an exclusive group inside our online community. We want to learn from you and work with you to strengthen men so that no man is left behind. Visit heroicmen.org today to stand with us. Someone paid it forward for you. Now will you do the same?